Hello and welcome back to Blow Up the Team. Jeremy here today, and we're going to be doing a draft recap for the Green Bay Packers today. I got Matt here with me, although he usually doesn't have a lot to add when it comes to the football videos. But if you have any interest to hear what he has to say, you can go check out his Detroit Tigers video, which came out yesterday. Or tomorrow, we will be back with, I believe, the Milwaukee Brewers. Is that right?
Yep.
All right. So, with that being said, quick disclaimer: we don't own the rights to any of these clips. Obviously, they're all property of the NFL, and the original clip video that I'm using is going to be linked in the description down below. So make sure to go ahead and check that out. But let's talk Packers. Uh, 2019 Packers were an interesting football team. They were not really supposed to be um, as good as what they wound up being last season. There was actually some predictions that had them at the bottom of the division at one point, and I think a big part of the reason that led to their 13-3 season was they were something like 8-1 in one-score games or something like that. I may have counted incorrectly, but I believe they were something like 8-1 in one-score games. That's not something that's necessarily sustainable going into next season. So, um, Packers fans, I know you guys, you obviously you got to be happy with last season. You did have the 13 wins, and I'm not here to bash about that. I'm not here to really talk about that at all. I'm just saying that there was just because they were 13-3 doesn't mean the team was perfect, moving forward. Um, there's definitely some holes that needed to be kind of shored up, and some areas that they needed to improve in, and um, I think that we'll start getting into some of those now. So let's talk about the offense. They were 18th in yards per game, 17th in passing yards, 15th in rushing yards, and 15th in points per game. So as you can see, um, for a team that's 13-3, those offensive stats are not so incredible as you might expect. Um, they also this offseason they did release Jimmy Graham, who is the leading receiving tight end. However, they did sign Rick Wagner to start at right tackle, which is that's a big pickup for them to be able to shore up that offensive line in any way that they can. Aaron Rodgers is as great as he is, he does have that unfortunate tendency to be a little bit injury prone. So any way that you can protect him is what you need to be looking at trying to do. Um, they also signed former Panther Devin Funchess. He's right now listed as wide receiver three, alongside Devontae Adams and second-year man Alan Lazard. Next up, moving over to that defense, 18th in yards allowed per game, 14th in passing yards, and 23rd in rushing yards. So now they were ninth in points allowed per game, but still none of these individual statistics would lead you to believe that this team was 13-3. So again, the team was good last year. We can't take that away from them. They had 13 wins, absolutely amazing, great for them. I personally really love Aaron Rodgers, so I'm happy to see him succeeding, but not necessarily something that you can look at and say, yes, that's going to be sustainable going into next season without some overhaul. So um, they did sign Christian Kirksey to start at inside linebacker, but other than that, I didn't really see any super notable defensive moves that they made in the offseason. So um, we'll get right into the draft here. The first round pick actually was kind of drawing some controversy here. They actually went with quarterback um, Jordan Love out of Utah State. Now, the reason, obviously, the most obvious reason that that's drawing some controversy is you already have Aaron Rodgers. What do you need another quarterback for? Um, Now let's before we get into that, let's just talk about for a second. He's got good size. He's got a strong arm. He's shown some athleticism. He can get outside the pocket. He can make stuff happen with his feet if he needs to. He does need to get a little bit more consistent with his decision making, but he has a natural ability to just flat out throw the football. Um, Again, it is a little bit of a controversial pick because they do have Aaron Rodgers, but for the team, I think it makes a lot of sense. Aaron, unfortunately, tends to be a little bit injury prone, as you mentioned, and he's not necessarily getting any younger either. So they needed to have a solid backup on the roster, and they also have a chance to, instead of having to go and get a veteran guy that they know he's just going to be a backup, they were able to go out and get a guy that maybe they have a chance where this could be their next guy in line after Aaron Rodgers, similar to maybe they're starting to look at, well, maybe we need another Favre to Rodgers handoff type action going on. So, um, I think this guy has a lot of potential, and if Aaron Rodgers is willing to take him under his wing a little bit and be willing to teach him, I think that he could be a great mentor for Jordan Love. But regardless, I think for the team that pick makes a lot of sense. I think that they needed to have somebody to back up Rodgers, considering how injury prone he is, and I think that was the guy that was left that made the most sense, in my opinion. He fit the system well, all of that. Next up, uh, AJ Dillon out of Boston College. He's definitely on the larger size for a running back, and he's great at yards after contact. He's honestly just tough to stop, even if the defense seems to make a correct read on what he's going to be doing. He's fast enough to take advantage of holes and run in open space. He is unfortunately not exactly a natural receiver, and he did have a high workload in college, which brings like some worries about wear and tear on his body. But overall, with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams both being on a contract year this year, they needed depth and somebody that they know is going to be around for a couple of years, and so they went running back here. And I don't think that's necessarily a poor decision on their part. I think that it makes sense. You want to make sure that if you do lose one of those two guys next season, that you'll have somebody that knows the offense and is ready to step in and make a difference for this football team, make an impact. Um, Moving on to the next pick, we got Josiah DeGuara, tight end out of Cincinnati. Um, he is a little bit on the smaller side as far as the tight end goes, um, but he does have slightly above average top end speed, and he shows upside in terms of being able to stretch the field with his vertical routes. And he does seem to have the speed to make. He does seem to have the speed to make the plays in the seam, although he's not quite a huge threat after the catch. Um, he does have good hands, but he's not quite big enough to be consistently lining up as a blocker. So they'll need to rely on some of their other bigger tight ends for that. As of right now, he is projecting to be your tight end two after the loss of Jimmy Graham, as I mentioned earlier in free agency. So. Um, Moving on, we've got Kamal Martin, inside linebacker out of Minnesota. Um, he's physically well built and he's got good height. He fights hard and he does a good job of keeping blockers off him, and he's still tracking the ball even when he is engaged with those blockers. He's a solid tackler, and he shows a lot of promise for zone coverage. He just seems to have a good feel for crossers, and he's be able to step up and make a play when they need him to. He does unfortunately look like he could show some limitations in man-to-man coverage at NFL level, um, but coming in the I believe this was the fifth round. So getting a fifth round guy that's going to be your backup inside linebacker to start the season, um, that's pretty good value that late in the draft. You don't know really what to expect, and it looks like he could have some solid upside for that Packers defense. Next up, they went with, in the sixth round, Jon Runyan, offensive guard out of Michigan. Now, he seems to just be a very versatile offensive lineman. I believe that he played both tackle positions in right guard or something like that. Um, he does have a little bit below average length for a tackle, and so he projects better as an offensive guard, especially when you consider that he has above average 40 time, short shuttle, and broad jump results for offensive guard. Um, I could not necessarily find him on the depth chart. I don't think that I think there was some contention on the contract that he was working on signing, if I remember correctly. Um, but he does seem to be good value that late in the draft to find somebody that's so versatile and could potentially fill in for multiple positions if need be. And next up, they went again with an offensive lineman, this time Jake Hansen, center out of Oregon. Um, Hansen seems to have kind of average size and length, and he does seem to be a bit athletically limited. He was considered to be, quote, an overachiever and technician. And it just seemed like he gets in position well, and he just fights hard to maintain it. Um, Athletic interior rushers seem to give him some concern in pass protection, and he's not particularly powerful blocking the run game. He is currently listed as the third string center. It looks like they were just kind of looking later in the draft here, as you'll see again with the next pick, to kind of beef up that offensive line. You make sure they have some depth, some solid guys that can come in if unfortunately injuries do just attack the way that they tend to in the NFL. Next up, Simon Stepaniak, offensive tackle out of Indiana. He has great upper body strength and he seems to anchor well, but he does get caught lunging at times and he can get straight up beat around the edge at other times. So um, definitely going to be a little bit more of a project piece than some of the others. Um, but he fights hard as a run blocker and plays whistle to whistle, which is something that can't really be taught. A lot of guys, they just either have that mentality or they don't. Um, and he seems to fit best in a like a power heavy offensive scheme from what I was reading. So we'll have to see with what if anything they'll be able to find a place for him if he's going to be more of a roster filler or a trade piece or who knows. Again, later in this draft, you really have no idea what to expect. Um, but he is currently listed as a four-string offensive tackle. Um, Next up, you got Vernon Scott, a safety out of TCU. He seemed to be more of a versatile defensive back. It seemed like he could play both corner and safety effectively. Although he's not really a ball hawk, he only seemed to have 2 career interceptions. Currently listed as a third-string safety. Um, and finally, Jonathan Garvin, defensive end of Miami. Um, he seems to have good size. He's got average top end speed, but has good quickness off the line. He shows flashes of the ability to slip blocks while rushing the passer, but he does have a tendency to stall out if his first move it seems to be ineffective. He has some explosive power, and he can set the edge against the run. And late in the 7th round, they were actually able to pick up somebody who's currently listed as a backup defensive end for the team. So um, I actually really I think that that's of their last kind of few picks here that they kind of bunched up in a row. They didn't have any picks at all in the 4th round, and then they went 3 in the 6th, 2 in the 7th. I really like this pick down here to find somebody that late in the draft that is already projecting to be potentially a rotational piece for the team next season. That's something that you kind of like to see. Um, but like I said, it just seemed like they were stacking depth, especially these 3 picks in here in the 6th round, stacking depth in that offensive line, which is something that obviously with that offensive line is what makes the offense run, right? So you need to have as much depth there as you can, and I really like the decision to go for depth there. The only question I did have about their draft was they replaced losing Jimmy Graham. They made a selection in the 3rd round. They got their quarterback, hopefully of the future. The biggest question mark for me was where's the wide receiver? I know that there was some talk about would they have been better off going for a wide receiver in the 1st round as opposed to Aaron Rodgers, as opposed to Jordan Love, so that they can maximize what time left they do have for Aaron Rodgers. And I did mention earlier that they did sign Devin Funchess in the offseason, but I don't think that he's like the answer to
Yeah,
that
Devin Funchess
answer.
is not the guy, and let me just that I understand trying to like there is no I cannot like I get you're like trying to go for their perspective. There is no reason to draft Jordan Love. I'm sorry, there is no reason. I get that you don't like you need a backup obviously, but that's what the point of getting the veteran backups are. Jordan Love, now they're trying to save face and say, oh, Jordan Love is going to get significant playing time. No, he's not. He's not, and obviously Aaron Rodgers is injury prone because he's much older. But I'm sorry, I hate this pick. I hate it. I think they entirely wasted it. Then they don't, and like you said, they don't draft a wide receiver for the rest of the draft. And Jordan Love's a good player, deserves a better shot than being on Green Bay as backup to Aaron Rodgers. Now, obviously, they needed someone better than I think it was Kaiser on their bench, but it's such a wasted pick. I feel like there's no reason to draft a quarterback on a guy who's got 2 to 3 years left. He's not going to get significant playing time until his.
I mean, Aaron Rodgers is 36. I just wanted to check. I didn't want to get his age wrong. So he is getting up there in years. I do agree with you. I think that you could overlook the Jordan Love pick if they went and they made a trade or made a selection of an impact wide receiver for this season. I think if they could have picked Love and still gotten their impact wide receiver that they desperately needed to play alongside Devontae Adams in this wide receiving core, I think that the uproar would have quieted down because they would have still met all their needs. But it feels like they chose the younger quarterback over the wide receiver that could potentially make an impact now. I don't hate it as much as you do because I do see Aaron is unfortunately been getting hurt a lot, and you can't have a team if everything is centered around him and he is the guy that's going to make this team go, and then he gets hurt and your season's over with a guy that has injury problems. You can't have that be the case. So I do understand the selection of Jordan Love personally. I just think that they desperately needed that wide receiver, and not selecting that is going to bring that Jordan Love selection under a like absolute magnifying glass. So I think that the biggest thing that they missed there for me, I don't dislike the Jordan Love pick. I think that they should have gone wide receiver early in the draft. I would have liked to have seen them. They were clearly weren't afraid to make trades. They traded up, I believe, to get this pick here for Jordan Love, and they traded for a bunch of extra picks late in the draft. I would have liked to have seen them be more active, maybe beginning of the second round, try and get one of those wide receivers that were coming off the board, and kind of fill in there. Let's see. Even if they had just traded somewhere in here, got KJ Hamler in the middle of the second round, that's not a bad option. That's not a bad guy to add to your team, but you needed to pick up something, and it just felt like that was what their draft was missing overall. Now, I don't hate the Jordan Love pick as much as you do, so maybe we could give two different grades. I personally am going to give them a B because I think that they did a good job of getting depth where they needed it, and I actually happen to like the Love pick there. Just because Aaron is getting older, he is injury prone, all of that I've already talked about. But I do think they missed out on wide receiver big time, which is what's going to stop it from being a higher pick. Actually, I'm going to give them a B minus actually because it does kind of feel like they missed out on some of those middle rounds as well. Not having a fourth round selection there, kind of, kind of, I don't know. It just felt to me like they maybe need a little bit more help this offseason than it looks like what they've gotten from the draft here. Do you have an opinion?
Um, I mean, I got once again, like even though that's the thing though is Aaron Rodgers also didn't get run over like he has been in as many in recent seasons where he got injured because their offensive line was significantly better this season than what it had been, which is a big reason why people get it, why quarterbacks tend to get injured is when their offensive line gets run over, and so like obviously it's still an injury risk, but like still there are other QBs that you can have play back up to that you could like the fact is that the gaping hole in this team was wide receiver, and they didn't get one, not even in the later rounds. Like we saw some pretty decent wide receivers get taken in later rounds by other teams,
Also true.
and like they didn't do any of that. They didn't even try in a later round to get a wide receiver, and instead they got a QB who's not going to get any significant playing time until probably even after his rookie contract. And so instead, like let's say Aaron Rodgers decides to, you know, never retire, which obviously will, but let's say he decides to play the next 3 years. Okay, well, bye, Jordan Love. Sorry we wasted your NFL career because we decided to draft you for some stupid reason. Like he's never going to get a chance unless barring Aaron Rodgers being out for a full season. And so it's just I can't see any, which is why I just think this draft was terrible. Like they got depth, like you said, but that one pick, like your first round pick is the most important pick in any draft, and they entirely wasted it. They ruined it. They took this really valuable pick. Every team gets one impact guy, like almost guaranteed. Let's buy it at someone we're not going to use.
So what would your rating then be for them?
I'm saying, well, for me, it'd be a C at best. I think B minus is fair if you're looking at the Jordan Love Jordan Love pick the way you are, which is I think is an understandable way to look at it. But from like my point of view, it's a C. But I can also understand the B minus for someone who likes the Jordan Love pick.
Yeah, so you'll give them a C. I give them a B minus, which I guess gives them an overall for our video, for our purposes, a C plus if you average our two. I was kind of scrolling while you were talking through. I'm trying to find the guy that they could have gotten. Like, okay, so I personally think that the guy to go up and get, in my opinion, was KJ Hamler. I think that was the guy to go up and get, in my opinion. Because he is that kind of slot receiver guy, get some bursts on the inside, where so he can play kind of complement Devontae Adams well, in my opinion. But obviously there are other guys in this draft. I don't know the entire draft off the top of my head, so there are other guys in this draft that they easily could have traded up for and would have been an impact player for them this year, and I think they did miss out on that. So.
And then the other thing I just want to say is like like this draft grade would not be nearly as bad for me because like once again drafts are affected by how you perform in the off season, and it's not like before the draft or after the draft they've signed any big wide receiver. They didn't. They did nothing, and so that's another just glaring
Just looking at
problem.
this depth chart just really quickly, I mean, Devontae Adams, Allen Lazard, who he is a second-year man, so maybe you could look for him to step up big this season.
Yeah, and Alan Lazard is also really interesting because I was actually looking him up, and while we were doing this, he was an undrafted free agent who, you know, who just for the fact he is a starting wide receiver says a lot to like what he's done, and so maybe he can step up more, but Still, like you're
I mean, I
it's a
guess
weird.
technically this is his third season because he had one reception in 2018, but
Yeah, he got so what it looks like is that he was on someone's practice squad, then didn't get make the team, and then they signed him, and yeah. So
But regardless, maybe they're looking at him to step up and be that guy that plays opposite Devontae Adams. But if let's say this, if he doesn't step up, if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy and Lazard doesn't step up, and you're looking at that wide receiver core, like they're triple covering Devontae Adams. Who's my guy I can throw to? And you don't have that guy, you don't have that answer, that guy that draws attention away from Devontae Adams, so he can continue to be as great as he has been. Then this draft will come back to bite them, in my opinion, if they didn't go wide receiver and it finds up being the weakness of the team. But I think we've covered all our bases. Let's not talk ourselves in circles here.
yes, I agree.
Um, if you like the video, make sure to leave a like. If you have something to say, go ahead and comment it down below. Hit the subscribe button. Again, the clip to the Aaron Rodgers highlights video, I believe that I was playing, the link to that will be in the description down below. Again, we don't own any of the clips to any of the football highlights that we ever show. But other than that, like, comment, subscribe, check out our Discord, check out our social media. All that's linked also down in the description down below. Um, and we will see you tomorrow for Matt's Milwaukee Brewers video. You have anything
All
to say
right.
about your Milwaukee Brewers video? Anything?
I'm actually excited to talk about the Brewers because they're going to be like the first good team I've covered in like the last two. I think the last two I talked about were Rockies and Tigers. I'm looking forward to talking about a good team.
All right, so you have that to look forward to. And other than that, we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.